Hello, this is Ofer Milik from Cal State University, San Marcos. In this video, we will explain the first 4 items in the list of items influencing the threat of new entry, which is one of Porter's 5 forces influencing industry profitability. For every item, we will first define what it means, then we'll explain how it either increases or decreases the threat of new entry. We will start with the effect of product or service differentiation. Differentiation is the extent to which products or services in the industry are perceived as unique. When there is high level of differentiation, it means that in the eye of the buyers, there are important differences between the brands in the industry. On the other hand, if there is low level of differentiation, pretty much all rivals are offering the same product or service. None of them is seen as unique. For instance, in the car industry, and especially in the luxury car segment, there are brands that are perceived to be distinct and unique. Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, Mercedes-Benz, to name a few. There are many other highly recognized brands in the car industry. Bentley, Jaguar, Porsche, and Maserati. On the other hand, if you are in the table salt industry, pretty much all brands are the same. There are several brands of this product. There's Morton Salt, but also Walmart Great Value, Diamond Salt, Cerebos, Augustin, and Hain Salt. But then salt is salt. By the way, can you think about opposite examples? That is there a segment in the car industry that has low differentiation? And can you think of a differentiated table salt? Differentiation also exists in services. If you need a surgeon or a lawyer, you would prefer to go with one that has much experience and better reputation. Yet, and this may be a personal preference, actually lack of one, I really don't mind who among the known service chains does the oil change in my car, nor do I specifically prefer who will cut my hair. Now, if you do have a preference for either of these services, you belong to a buyer category for which these services are perceived to be more differentiated. Note that it is not enough for a product or service to simply be different. The buyers have to be aware of those differences, and those differences need to be appreciated and stand out as unique among the other brands. Well, how does the level of differentiation, that is, the level of uniqueness between current brands in our industry, influences the threat of new entry? When there is low differentiation, the buyers really don't see any meaningful differences between the current brands. They are all pretty much standard. That means that the new entrant can get customers by simply offering the same thing for a lower price. On the other hand, if there is high level of differentiation in the industry, then price is much less of an issue, and the new entrant would have a difficult time gaining customers. This is because the customers see their current preferred brand as unique. In a way, at the extremes, when there is high differentiation, each brand is essentially a monopoly with no comparable rivals. For example, if you are an Apple enthusiast, a PC is such an inferior product in your mind that no matter how cheap a new brand of PC is, you will not be persuaded to buy it. It is also possible that one segment in the industry would have high differentiation, yet another segment may have rather low differentiation. Even though the threat of entry into the Apple Mac segment is low due to extreme level of differentiation, it is rather easy to enter into the PC assembly segment of the computer industry, partly because of very low differentiation. All PCs run the same Windows system, and every app would run the same on any PC. Last, note that like every item in the five forces tables, it is a continuum. Differentiation can range from low to medium, medium high, or high. Now we move to the next item on the list, buyer's switching costs. Buyer's switching costs are the pains that the buyers experience when they switch to another brand in the industry. When such pains are high, the buyers are essentially locked in with their current provider of product or service. When switching costs are low, it is easier to enter the industry because it would not be hard for the buyer to buy from the new entrant. However, if switching costs are high, the buyer would not be too happy to switch to the new entrant, as they will suffer if they change who they buy from. There are three types of such pains: monetary, cognitive, and/or emotional. The monetary switching costs happen when it would cost the buyer money to switch and buy from a different provider after they already bought their current product or service. For example, the cost of breaking a contract or the need to buy additional equipment. If you bought a plane ticket with one airline and you wish to cancel and fly with another airline, you will have to pay fees and may even lose all the money that you paid if the ticket is non-refundable. If you own a printer and you want to buy a different one, more than likely your current toner cartridge will not fit the new printer and you'll have to buy new cartridges. These are additional monetary costs that the buyer will have to pay if they change what they currently use. Note that these costs arise after purchase. If you're in the market for a car, changing your mind is easy. However, once you actually purchased a car, changing your mind and unbuying it would be nearly impossible. The second type of switching cost is cognitive or learning. These are the headaches related to relearning how to use a different brand in the industry. For example, switching between Windows-based PC and a Mac. When I heard so many people praising the Apple MacBook, I asked to try it, but then I had to relearn the Apple operating system. It was just too much of a headache. I was spending too much time finding out how to do this or that on the new computer. I ended up returning it and went back to my familiar Windows PC. In other cases, there are very little learning efforts required to switch between brands. All hamburger chains operate nearly the same, and so do gas stations. You don't really need to relearn how to use a shirt, a hammer, or a book. The third and last type of switching cost is emotional. This is when the buyer has an emotional attachment to a specific brand of product or service. Switching to a different brand may not cost anything, nor may it involve a mental effort, but you may still feel the emotional pain. If you love your current brand of shampoo and it is suddenly discontinued, it may not cost you more, and it is easy to learn how to use a different shampoo, yet you may be in pains emotionally. Though such an example may sound odd and irrational, emotional bond to brands can be extremely strong and influential. Indeed, perceived differentiation and emotional switching cost are indistinguishable. If you believe, for whatever reason, that the product or service you are using is extremely unique and differentiated, then most likely you will suffer emotionally if you will have to stop using it. Yet, not always differentiation and switching costs occur together. For example, if you have a 2-year contract with your cell phone provider, you can switch to another provider, but you will have to pay early termination fees, monetary switching costs. However, there is little to no differentiation between the service provided by most wireless companies, at least in my mind. Last and importantly, switching costs can actually be manipulated. Successful firms will find ways to increase or decrease switching costs for their benefit. Monetary switching costs may be rather easy to overcome by paying for the buyer's expenses. If you make your new product or service easy to learn and compatible with existing brands, you can reduce cognitive switching cost. Finally, emotional bonds are quite hard to build and to break. This is it for buyer switching cost. At last, we get to a simple and straightforward item. Capital requirements is the amount of money that is needed to start operating and competing in our industry. Capital requirements are the price of the entry ticket to the industry. For some industries, the needed capital is very little. If you wish to sell your homemade jewelry, start a cleaning service, construct web pages, give music lessons, or resell items on eBay, you don't need much capital. On the other hand, there are industries that require a lot of capital just to start operating. Oil refining, manufacturing cars, telecommunications, electrical power generation, all are capital-intensive industries. So, the lower the entry ticket to an industry is, the higher the threat of new entry, because more potential new entrants would have the needed capital. On the other hand, the more capital is required to enter an industry, the fewer would be those who are able to enter, and the more protected would be our industry from the threat of new entry. We now proceed to discuss economies of scale, or EOS, and their effect on the threat of new entry. Economies of scale describe the relationship between two variables. The first is volume of activity per certain time frame. For example, how many trinkets are produced per minute, how many customers per hour are served, how many truckloads are distributed every day, how many airplanes are produced per month, or how many research and development projects are conducted per year. The specific time frame depends on the specific industry and the specific activity. The second variable is the cost to produce 1 unit of whatever the industry or activity are producing, 1 trinket, or 1 satisfied customer, 1 truckload, and so on. We put volume per time frame as our horizontal axis and cost to produce 1 unit on the vertical axis. The term economies of scale refers to the unit cost reductions that happen when volume per time frame increases. That is, when economies of scale are high, unit costs are reduced the greater the volume of activity is. Note that the relationship is typically not linear but curved. Usually, the reductions are substantial in the beginning, then the benefits of increased volume taper off and become insignificant. Now, why do we see such behavior? The most common source of this is large upfront investments. As such large fixed costs are spread over more and more units produced, the cost per unit decreases. This is quite typical when expensive, high-capacity machines are involved. When you have such costly machine, you want to use it as much as possible to spread out the initial high cost. However, this can also happen in other aspects of the business. There can also be economies of scale in research and development. For example, pharmaceutical research, looking for new medications. The process from the lab to the patient is long, expensive, and quite risky. Let's assume that the chance of success are 5%. This means that a small company that can afford running only one R&D project at a time has 95% chance of failure that may destroy the company. On the other hand, a much larger company may run more than 20 projects at a time, and statistically, it would have 100% chance of developing the new wonder drug that would make more than enough money to pay for all other 19 failed projects. Now for marketing. An example of substantial economies of scale in marketing is TV commercials during the Super Bowl annual championship of the NFL. With more than 100 million viewers, the Super Bowl is the most watched TV broadcast in the US. A 30-second commercial cost on average $4 million. These high costs of advertising are gladly paid by companies such as Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Budweiser, Best Buy, FedEx, Ford, and Pizza Hut. It makes sense for these companies to put these millions of dollars because they can spread these costs over many products that they sell. In service, the cost of an expensive CRM, customer relationship management system, makes sense if it can be spread over many customers. In distribution, the cost of delivering a package is much lower if you can fill up a whole truckload of packages as opposed to sending each package separately, but you have to have enough volume to fill up a truck. Economies of scale can also happen in purchasing. If you buy in large quantities, you may be able to receive volume discounts. All these examples were situations of high or substantial economies of scale. However, there are situations where economies of scale are low. In such situations, the relationship between volume per time frame and unit cost is rather flat, and increased volume of operations does not substantially reduce unit cost. This is when the fixed costs are low and variable costs are the main cost. This is typical in many small businesses, such as your local bicycle shop, or personal services, such as a law firm or a plumber. There are also situations of diseconomies of scale. Diseconomies of scale happen when unit costs increase with volume of operation. Independent ethnic restaurants and hairdressing salons tend to be small establishments. Serving hundreds of diners or cutting the hair of dozens of clients in the same place does not reduce the cost of doing business and more than likely would increase unit cost. Going back to the case where economies of scale are high, how would that reduce the threat of entry into our industry? In this case, a new entrant face a you damn if you do, you damn if you don't situation. That is, no matter what the new entrant would do, they will be in trouble. Note that the assumption here is that the new entrant will have the same high fixed cost just like the existing rivals. and will be operating on the same economies of scale curve as the other rivals. Let's start with the if you don't part. If the new entrant chooses to start with small volume, it will have rather high unit cost. However, the existing rivals will be operating at high volume and will have unit cost much lower. Worse, if the price per unit is not too much above what it cost for the existing rivals, the new entrant might be in a situation where it loses money for every unit it sells. So, let's see what is the problem with the if you do options. In this case, the new entrant operates with high volume, similar to what existing rivals do. It will have similar unit costs to all others. However, the problem here is risk. Yes, it would cost the same if we produce a lot, but there is no guarantee that our products will be actually sold and will produce revenues. The problem here is not matching unit cost, but of risk. To sum up, when there are high economies of scale in the industry, new entrants are confronted with two unappealing choices. Either match rivals' volume and take big financial risk, or start small and suffer high unit cost. If these are the choices, a new entrant may decide that it is better not to enter our industry and the threat of entry is reduced. If, on the other hand, when economies of scale are low, it means that increased volume does not give much advantage. In this case, a new entrant does not have to choose between the two bad options we mentioned before. A new entrant can start small, minimizing risk, and having similar cost per unit. Therefore, industries with low economies of scale effects are more exposed to the threat of new entry.